Looking at the landscape of languages available to you when you try to start picking one to learn, there are many, many choices and there are many reasons to choose, one or the other. And for what I'm seeing in 2019 and using the languages that I'm familiar with, I want to make a argument to start with Golang, which is not one that I think comes up very often when you think about languages to start out with learning. So there's a few reasons for that, and I want to go over just like the highlights that I think are important to someone that is just starting out with programming and maybe has only written a couple lines of code or hasn't written any at all yet. So one of the big things that I think is really important is that the hello world to with Golang is less than 10 lines of code. And that might seem trivial. The lines of code is not really so much that's important, but it's that it's very much you just need to create one file and write those lines of code. It doesn't come with a framework that you have to worry about and build around that kind of takes some of the some of the the undercarriage you know and hides it from you or already does it for you. With Golang, you just create one Go file, and in 10 lines of code, you can print something out to a console. And getting to that point can be one of is the biggest step to take and can be quite intimidating. So I think that just keeping having something that you can spin up with and quickly get a result with is really important to someone who hasn't written anything before. Also, on that same line, Golang is cross-platform, so you can run it on Windows, Mac, and Linux, all with the same code, and you don't have to worry about changing anything. The packages that come with Golang, they work across platforms, so opening files, and once you get to that, printing to the console, everything like that runs seamlessly, and you don't have to worry about if you have Windows or if you have Mac or if you have Linux. And the language itself is well kept very, very simple and straightforward. They try to they try not to add complexity unless it's necessary. They can be quite opinionated actually about it, but when you're starting out and you just need to try to figure out how to use variables, write for loops, things like that, having less options or needing to know less things, I think is a stronger way to get started and focus on the actual building uh, of a piece of software instead of having to go and learn about many of the object-oriented types of things that might come up in C# or Java. So the other one thing that I do want to mention about Golang is that it is really meant for backends. It's not, you can't, I think some people are kind of making something you can do with front end, or I've seen something, making a Windows app with it or making a web page with it. But largely, it's meant for backend, so not anything, think of anything that doesn't actually have a user interface that displays pictures or images or something like that. So it's meant to run code that runs in the background or on servers. But this is that is the core of a language, is just running things, running through things in the background. So and one of the biggest things getting started is having the resources needed to begin learning and having them be clear, succinct, and easy to use. Tour of Go is a web page that I'll link and I can show you. It allows you to run Golang code inside the browser through their various tutorials. It doesn't take too long to get through them, but it gives you a primer into the language and explains everything that you need to know to really start building your first programs. It's a very concise but complete view of the language. And in addition, everything is open source, and the documentation that comes with every package of Go, you can just search for it on in Google, any package you want, is it can be verbose, but it's easy to read, easier to read and easier to find than many of the other languages that I've used. And then finally, one thing that can be a little confusing to start with is the package manager. Golang actually doesn't have a package manager per se. You just import code directly from GitHub. So people will post their packages essentially in GitHub, and instead of having to run a package manager to install special things that you might need to do with the language, you can just import them directly from their GitHub link, and that can kind of eliminate some of the difficulties that come with managing once you've installed something in your project, figuring out how to manage that down the road. So I think that if you're trying to start out with programming in 2019, it's a really good idea to check out Golang. You can go through Tour of Go without having to set up anything. You just go to it with your browser, and if you do and you end up liking it, you can start installing it and getting to work on your own projects. And if you don't, obviously you can go and choose any other language. But I think with the low barrier for entry and some of the ease, the low amount of knowledge you need to get started, I think Go is a really, really competitive language to start out with.